All right, we've got this hack number three, Schema Therapy hack number three. Um, and I was thinking about this one, and it's really about helping therapists go from, when they even have a clear formulation, a clear case conceptualization, a mode map. One of the things that can happen is that there's a step between that and starting treatment and getting engaged in treatment that can be a bit overwhelming. And then it's like, where do you start? Like, where do you actually start with the treatment techniques? Okay, because in schema, we're not necessarily so prescriptive about step one, step two, step three. You have to do X, Y, and Z in a particular order. Okay, so we have this principle called treatment objectives in the conceptualization. And today I wanted to share what are probably my top 3 or 4 treatment objectives that tend to come up time and again in my own therapy and in supervision, as a way of just sharing what tends to come up, and also this idea of all roads lead to the critic. All right, we're going to talk about that. So the first thing I'll put up there is with treatment objectives. Okay, so I'm just going to get that happening up here. And if we think about a formulation, right, Chris, that, a typical-ish formulation, you might have someone with a vulnerable child mode, let's say some kind of critic mode, not really common. And then, of course, a coping mode or two, right? So let's say an avoidant protector. Okay.
And so these things they're past having kind of goals and problems. They're kind of like we know what the goals and the problems are, and now it's kind of like what do I do now?
Totally. I mean, and I guess that's a big thing, right? Like often even the clients would say to you, you'd have this session with the formulation, and then they'll say something like, wow, like that's great and it fits and everything like that. Now what?
Yeah.
Like, what do we actually do about it? And in new schema therapists in particular, there can be a bit of anxiety about that. About okay, now conceptually there are all these techniques, but how do you come up with treatment objectives, and where should you start, kind of thing. So the treatment objectives can be very centering. Now, for someone with that kind of formulation, so here's how I tend to think about it, and I think it can be a little bit of a hack, and it can help new therapists to get a bit more centered on the objectives. But I think it can also help, even if you're supervising others, to convey treatment objectives in a really clear way. Let's see how it goes. So I think an almost universal objective is going to be mode awareness. Okay. So there's going to be some part of the therapy in the beginning where you're trying to help the client get aware of their prominent modes and schemas perhaps as well.
And part of that, I guess, is also getting some separation, isn't it? Sort of seeing it as a parting it up. There's a part of me that's critical. There's a side of me that is that's feeling sad, and a part of me that doesn't want to talk about it, sort of thing.
Yeah, and a part of you that and how it's involved in the problems.
It's like fusion, like all of me doesn't want to be here. Yeah, seeing it as a separate.
So let me give you an example. Like it's a common example in therapy might be. So let's say there was a side of the client that's causing problems, which is like a perfectionistic over-controller mode. Yeah.
Yep.
A big part of the therapy, and let's say that's involved with like problems in the relationships and problems at work and all that kind of stuff. A big part of the therapy is going to be about getting that on the mode map and getting them aware of how that mode interacts for them, how that mode works for them. So on the one hand, it might work because it gives them control and makes them feel, in charge of things, and it helps them feel less anxious at times and different things. But also building that awareness of some of the costs of that, like in terms of like things aren't always real fun, and not too good with the burnout levels, and maybe other people feel a bit like I'm sort of dominating things, and and that's part of the mode awareness.
Okay. It links back to your formulation.
We link it to the formula. So there's this phase of mode awareness that we really need to help clients become aware. Okay. So that's a really common treatment objective. I mean, I don't want to say really that's universal for everybody has to get that. Okay. So it can be a good place to start. But then there's this other theme that keeps coming up. And I like to say in schema that all roads lead to the critic. Okay. And what I mean by that is that almost all of our clients, I won't say all because there's some
Yeah.
clients maybe that have like a deficit in this mode. Almost all of our clinical clients will have some issue with a critic mode.
Yep.
Okay. And when I say that all roads lead to the critic, what I mean is that the critic mode, whatever it might be, is really central to the client's problems and really central to the system of modes. Okay, meaning that in the interplay between all the modes, the critic is right there and front stage in that. Okay, so
But sometimes it's front stage to us though, but it might not be front stage to them. So if for
sure.
example, someone is very avoidant, might be coming to you and you might not be aware of the critic
Well,
because they're
that's a
avoiding
good
things.
point
Yeah.
because I shouldn't say front stage because that
Yeah.
implies that it's front that it's
Yeah,
that it's
it's
they're
front
aware of
stage
it.
in the psychopathology and the
Yeah,
problems, and,
yeah.
and it's a big part of the problem, but might not be as it might be. I always think
In
it's like the
fact, it's
snake.
backstage. We have this front
Yeah,
stage, backstage
yeah.
idea. So
It's like the
it's
snake in
actually
the grass. So that's kind of like in the grass, and you kind of don't want to step out there. And if you jump, but it's
yeah.
sort of bringing it out into the light and actually going,
And
look.
it's often so central to the
Mm,
problems in the sense that, the critic's there whenever there's
mm.
vulnerability, the critic's there jumping out saying,
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at you, you're weak. And
So it'd be very
um,
implicit as well, kind of.
it's also driving a lot of coping behavior. Like it's also involved in a lot of like the maladaptive coping and driving, let's say, perfectionism or, avoidance. So it's really central to the problem. So that's what I mean when all roads lead to the critic. So how I tend to write this up, and I guess you could do it in different ways. I'd love to hear how you do it too, Chris. I write it up like this, right? So the objective would be we want to reduce the dominance of the critic. Oh, I didn't quite get that properly. Of the critic and increase healthy self-compassion and self-care. / that's the healthy adult, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we have this this dual task in schema, which is that we want to address the negative process, which in this case we're focusing on the critic, but our task is also to increase or build up the corresponding healthy adult attributes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a treatment objective right there. And I guess what I'm saying is that this, in all roads lead to the critic. What I'm saying is you could do a lot worse than starting with some critic work for most of our clients because of how intertwined the critic is into people's problems. Okay, so if you're ever, this is the tip. Here we go. This is the hack. If you're ever a bit confused about where to start, consider whether some work on the critic might actually be a good place. Okay, it's a good go-to in those times when maybe you're overwhelmed with like a lot of targets, and that you could actually start in quite a few places. That's the tip. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some particular cases that are really pertinent to this sort of borderline presentations, complex trauma, avoidant personality, dependent personality, depression, this sort of stuff. There are going to be some that, like we said, when we talk about this, all roads lead to it. It's all roads might lead to it in those presentations. There are going to be some that might not. But in those presentations, it's definitely worth just, it's almost like dragging it out into the light.
Yeah.
Because, I think that sometimes people's coping styles, this is what sort of pushes it into the background, and it might not necessarily be as pertinent, but it is pertinent given the fact that when people do go out of their comfort zone, that it activates the whole system. So sometimes if we can work on the critic initially, that issue is sort of help with in terms
and
of
put in the limelight. Yeah, as you say, it's quite interesting too that a lot of folks, when you make it really clear about, hey, this critic mode. I mean, firstly, can we get aware of that? It's really related to all these problems. Like if you think about what you're coming in with, I mean, this is a big part of it.
Yeah.
So again, think you can do a lot worse than starting there if you're ever overwhelmed with where to start.
And we often talk about, bypassing coping modes as another objective. And I don't know whether you're going to put this down next. But you are kind of, if you're working and doing focus on a critic mode, you're doing that anyway. So you might be kind of doing experiential techniques where you are dealing with the critic whether it's a punitive critic or a demanding critic, but you're doing that, yeah, possibly experientially anyway. So you're
Yeah.
kind of having a dual focus.
Well, there's actually a lot of techniques. That's the thing about these objectives.
Mm.
It doesn't list the techniques.
Yeah,
It's just the objective,
yeah,
right? And you could hang like reducing the dominance of the critic and increasing healthy self-compassion. You could probably come up with 100 techniques
yeah,
that might help you achieve that.
yeah.
Okay. So this can be really centering to say, okay, what am I trying to achieve here? The next one I've got there, which tends to come up once you've dealt with some of the critic, is to manage and heal the vulnerable child mode and meet the needs, okay, of the vulnerable child. So this is often another objective that we're going to need to get to for our clients. All right, which is about, as you say, going backstage and starting to do some of the healing. When we say manage and heal, I guess there's some differentiation of part of our role is to help the client manage the daily activation of that mode if it's causing problems in their life. And the other part is more like getting some longer term healing in that mode. So that's another objective. And of course, some of the focus will be doing things like imagery rescripting and having like a limited reparenting focus.
Yeah.
And number 4, I'm just going to make an example, like with this fictional case of someone with a lot of avoidant protector. You'd be addressing that the over reliance on avoidance coping. So I usually write this up as reducing an over reliance on the coping mode. So reducing an over reliance on avoidance coping, but then also going into what we're trying to achieve with the healthy adult. All right, which is and increasing therefore engagement with values and needs.
And I guess these treatment objectives kind of link in. If you're kind of you're having supervision with someone and they're suggesting for you to do imagery or chair work or do some cognitive work, always having the idea of what's the point, what's your objective, what are you trying to achieve from that, and going back to what these are noting. You've got an idea. I'm trying to do imagery because I'm trying to get you more aware of needs and trying to get you more aware of reducing the reliance of the detachment. So there's a reason for you to do
and
it.
Sometimes it's funny, like if you maybe doing some supervision and folks have been doing some imagery work and it's not immediately clear to me what they're trying to achieve with that imagery work. Yeah. And how it links back to like an objective. So again, this can be really centering. So that's the hack, guys. That's an example of a set of treatment objectives linked to a common formulation that I guess we would all deal with from time to time, and how you might write that up and how you might think about it. And this other principle I really like, which is all roads lead to the critic. All right. And meaning you can do a lot worse than doing some critic work, helping the client become aware of and start to interact with the critic in healthier ways, and reducing the dominance of that critic will help just about every client. Of course, not every client, but it's almost always a good place to start. So any final thoughts from you, Chris?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, hopefully everyone enjoys this little hack. You might be interested in doing some schema therapy training with us. We have a portfolio of schema therapy workshops that are online. And if you want to check out www.schematherapytraining online, we have a lot of masterclass courses as well as introductory courses into schema therapy. So you might want to check. We've got
more hacks, people. We've got more hacks to come. So, all right. So, Chris, I think you're thinking of another hack coming in next month. And so we look forward to that, to sharing something new in the next month or so. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you later, Chris.
Bye.